Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Total Soccer Show. My name is Taylor Rockwell. I am still losing my voice. We've got MLS playoffs to discuss. The third legs of the second round, that is really the first round, are in the books. On to the third round, which is really the second round, in which they play one game instead of three after the international break, 11 days from now. It's going to be great. Joe Lowry, I think I've gotten all the snark out of my system. I am excited to be here because some of these games were nuts. Lots of cards, lots of goals, some very good goals too. Did you enjoy the third legs of the second round that is really the first round? Okay, now I've got all the snark out of my system.
I did very much enjoy these games. I think there was an all-time game, like an all-time MLS sort of game, not just playoff game in this bunch that we're going to talk about. Can I do a little snark for just a second? Because I've been the defendant of the playoff format, and I'm not gonna argue against myself in the past here. I do still think that the round one best of three is a lot of fun.
Agreed.
I had a first round takeaways piece go up along with Cesar Hernandez for ESPN earlier this week. And honestly, one of the things that I highlighted in that piece is how nonsensical the scheduling of this format was in round one. I'm going to say this, then I'm going to be done, and I can talk about soccer the rest of the show. Why on the opening weekend did we not have any Saturday games? Talked about that already. Why did it go Friday to Sunday to Monday to Tuesday to Wednesday? Why did we have 4 different teams on 3 days rest and 2 teams on 7 days rest? None of how they actually scheduled the first round games made any sense whatsoever. It made it difficult for the neutral to actually understand what the cadence of the postseason is in a narrative series where it should be easy to set up narratives and rhythm for the neutral viewer. Absolutely mind-boggling stuff from MLS and how they scheduled these games. I'm yet to hear a coherent explanation for why this is the way that it was. I still had a great time. I just wish that more people could have had a great time watching these games too, but I fear people didn't really know when the games were.
If you haven't heard a very coherent explanation, what is the most coherent explanation you've heard? Why wouldn't you have a game on Saturday night?
The Discord was theorizing that it had something to do with Fox, because these games, a lot of them anyway, were airing on FS1 during the postseason, so they're on Apple TV, but then also on FS1, and that maybe Fox had those slots booked for something else. I'm not totally sure that I buy that, but I don't know. I really don't know what was going on here. All that said, I had a great time watching these games. Like, they were tons of fun. We had goals on goals on goals. We had a lot of good teams advancing. We had some narrative drama. I had a great time. Just some reasons I'm still scratching my head, too.
So Joe had a great time. I had a great time. I'm going to guess Jeff had the most great time. Jeff, has the euphoria died down? Are you naming all potential future children Dane, Saint, or Claire? Was that already the case?
Well, I got a vasectomy in 2021, so probably not. Yeah.
Snip, snap, baby, get that undone. You're good to go.
It's, no.
I could have had 1,000 guesses. 1,001 guesses. And I never could have guessed what Jeff was going to lead with on today's show.
I was maybe thinking there'd be a yes and I wasn't ready for no vasectomy. That's a new version of improv that I'm used to.
It's from the Michael Scott School of Improv, but just in a very different progressive way. No, I think, look, I mean, it was cool to see for Minnesota, right? Like, and it was, I was in the press box for those 2 games as well. And Joe, like, completely agree on the scheduling specific snafus. I laid all those out before the playoffs on 5-a-sides as well. And it doesn't make any sense when you look at it from the outside, how you want to space them out this way. I think that the FS1 theory holds credence, though, when you look at which games ended up on weird days. But when you look at, like, the vibes in Minnesota, this is one of those games that, like, turns people into lifelong fans, right? Like, it's one of those where I think that a lot of people in Portland really fell for the double doink, even if it wasn't necessarily like MLS Cup. I think that was a moment that got people really excited a decade ago, and I think it can have a similar effect on kind of neutral Minnesota sports fans who went into the series hearing, hey, Minnesota always loses against Seattle in this sport, and then suddenly, oh, they won in very dramatic fashion. Like, that's one that's it's going to live in the memory banks for quite some time, and having been there, it was, you know, as exciting of a game as I've been to since MLS Cup 22. It was better than 23 in terms of just like the octane, and no disrespect to the people of Columbus, but you had that thing a little more comfortable than this game ever was. We'll talk about it more. I think it's a segment 2 topic, this game that we're alluding to, but it's a blessing, this sport. It really is.
That game was amazing. That shootout was amazing. Like 4 different times, I was certain I knew what was going to happen, certain someone was going to miss or someone was going to make, and then they did the opposite. When Boxall stepped up and the commentators were like, club legend, institution, their most important player, I was like, please don't miss, please don't miss, please don't miss. I have no vested interest in Minnesota, but I desperately did not want him to be the one, and he wasn't. So it all worked out in the end.
Beautiful. Yeah, once they earmark those people as like, this is the heart and soul, it's just like, protect them at all costs. Yes, I don't care who it is. Yeah, there's someone else in the queue.
I was sure Di Rosario was going to make. He looked so unbothered by everything Dane St. Clair was doing, to the point where he put it like dead center on the spot. Like, oh, you wanna have issues? You wanna quibble with my spot? Fine, I'll put it right here. I'm gonna very calmly bury this. And then he did not. Crazy times. Crazy times.
Why did we bury this one on segment 2? Do we want to just kick off with it?
Because we've got San Diego Portland to discuss.
Oh, you're right.
Yes,
You're right.
Yes, which
right. More goals.
is a game that
one
I
team.
genuinely enjoyed. I thought this was very fun. Portland supporters, I'm guessing, did not. Juan Mosquera especially did not think this was a fun game. At a certain point, he just decides, you know what? I don't really want to play here anymore, but I do want to elbow Chucky Lozano in the throat. And mission accomplished in that regard. But I felt like this was San Diego looking sharp, Joe. It was Portland looking a little bit tired, a little bit frustrated. But largely, to me, it was San Diego with a statement victory here.
100%. And Jeff, you and I talked about game 2 of this series, where Portland very much changed their tactical approach under Phil Neville. Where in game 1, the San Diego victory at Snapdragon, Portland sat in really a 4-4-2 mid-block. They invited San Diego to come and break them down. San Diego did that. So Phil Neville decided to change something for game 2. And to his credit, it worked. And I think it caught San Diego a little bit unawares in that game at Providence Park, even if San Diego were still probably on balance a slightly better team. Or I think we talked about it as a draw, maybe being the preferred result in that game, or the ideal result based off of how those teams played. Tyler Heaps, San Diego FC sporting director, front office chief, Tyler Heaps had a quote to Charlie Boehm ahead of this game 3 that I thought was delightful. So he said to Charlie, quote, "What Phil Neville, did on the weekend," referring to game 2, "in my opinion, was suicidal. Yes, it worked, but going 1v1 all over the field, there's moments in that game where Portland, are 1v2 in the back. And I feel like we're one pass away from a breakaway, but we just weren't sharp enough on the day, and that's on us." In game 3, Phil Neville ran it back. They ran the exact same pressing structure, positionally it was the exact same. They went man-to-man all over the field. And San Diego ripped it to shreds. Absolutely ripped it to shreds. And we talked about how difficult it is to run the same system against San Diego twice in a row, because there's no team, I think Columbus included, who's better at working their way through a high press than San Diego. At the very least, it's San Diego and Columbus. And San Diego scored not one, multiple goals off of just marching right through Portland's press. Portland, again, we're trying to go man-to-man. The way that San Diego beat that press primarily was by having Anders Dreyer drop really deep into central midfield. Kamal Miller in the first half was playing as a left-sided center back in this game, and he wouldn't track Dreyer all the way because he was afraid, understandably so. And so all of a sudden, Kamal Miller wasn't certain exactly how committed he should be to Dreyer because he was dropping crazy deep. Dreyer could receive face forward and just burn Portland over and over again. The Timbers did have some good moments in this game. They did force some turnovers. They could have gotten a goal in the first half, but they were always second best, and Phil Neville's approach very much did not work, and San Diego's very much did.
So do we feel like there's a lot San Diego can take out of 4 straight games against Portland? Do we feel like they should be feeling confident heading into the next leg? Or given the way Portland tried to set up and defend, is it basically kind of start over, San Diego play their possession game, but have to wait and see what the opponent throws at them?
Yeah, I think look, it's not the biggest test they were going to have in the bracket, but I think we knew that. But I think what this did allow was that San Diego had some wobbles down the stretch in September and October in the regular season, and this is just kind of a chance to recrystallize some of these things. Also difficult with CJ Dos Santos having his injury, and then, Cisniega coming in. So getting a clean sheet under the backup goalkeeper, I think, is going to do them a lot of good coming into the next round. And I think also reintroducing Chucky Lozano, and hopefully he's able to continue to play in these playoffs. I haven't heard anything to the contrary necessarily yet, but correct me if I'm wrong. I think that weathering some of these both on-field struggles that they were running into as teams had more tape on them and therefore were better able to figure out how to slow them down in possession and also bypass them out of it. But also, again, these sort of off-field issues in the locker room, I think being able to massage both of those out a little bit better sets them up to be much better prepared to take on Minnesota in the next round.
And Jeff, you mentioned Lozano. I don't know if Chucky Lozano is coming back into the 11. To be totally honest, given
and
how
that's okay too, yeah.
I mean, which is bizarre to say, and I'll get to that in just a second. But Amal Pellegrino's been so good on the left wing. He scored 2 goals in this game. This was the Amal Pellegrino I was hoping would show up in San Jose when I watched a bunch of his tape in Norway, and he scored a bajillion goals in the Norwegian top flight. Then he gets to San Jose, and it didn't work out. There wasn't the structure around him. He's not going to dominate MLS the same way he's going to dominate a lower quality league. And unless he's playing for San Diego, I suppose is the real takeaway here. That was a really savvy
playing
pickup.
With better players, yeah.
Yeah, it does help. Better players, coherent system, all that stuff. Yeah. We're breaking new ground here, I think, across the board.
Big if true. Big if true.
It's so impressive to me that in this game, who started for San Diego? Or rather, who didn't start for San Diego? No Chucky Lozano. No Patty McNair, who was like the veteran center back that they signed over the winter to build him into this season. No Franco Negri, who was the left back with MLS experience coming in from Miami. None of those players. No CJ Dos Santos for the injury that Jeff mentioned.
No Luca De La Torre.
No Luca De La Torre. That's what I'm getting to. And there's more. No Marcus Ingvartsen, who was their 10-goal Bundesliga scorer that was then stashed in Denmark at the sister club. And then he comes in. He's the day one starter. He's been injured all year. Oh, and no Milan Olaski. That's at least 6 players. I lost track somewhere in there. And then I think, De La Torre was already mentioned. This is not the San Diego team that I thought they'd be from a roster perspective. It's not the San Diego team that I thought they'd be from a lineup perspective. It doesn't matter. I am genuinely convinced that Mikey Varas can put out almost anybody in his squad on the field, and they still have a real chance to win out from this point forward. I mean, it is absurd how few of the pieces that I thought they would absolutely desperately need in 2025 to survive. It's absurd how few of those pieces they've needed to thrive. I'm endlessly impressed with what San Diego are doing. I don't know how, if you're Portland, you're not staring at the team that faced you 4 times in a row and beat you handily in 3 of those games and thinking we are doing something and honestly most things wrong. And that's not just a Portland thing. That's San Diego clearly being a model club in MLS, and it happened really, really fast.
So we've got the win for San Diego. On they go. Commiserations to Portland, but well done, taking it to 3 games and some shootouts and some good times in there. Let's move to Miami-Nashville, shall we? A game that did not go the way I thought it would, in the sense that Miami won, and I thought that's what would happen. But, Joe, did I see Messi pressing? Is that a thing that I saw in this game? I'm very confused.
Yeah, Messi pressing. Mascherano praised him for it after the game. Messi cared in this game, and that was the big question for Miami coming into this year's postseason, I think, because I don't think there's a team, even as complimentary as I am about San Diego, I don't think there's a team that cradles their own destiny in their own aging South American hands quite like Miami cradled their own destiny in their aging South American hands. I mean, Miami have the ability to win every single game that they play in Major League Soccer against MLS teams, and that's what they showed in this game. They were taking over the game from the jump. Messi seemed to have enough in the tank that he was leading the line in a Luis Suarez less game because Suarez had kicked Andy Najar in the crotch. Yeah, he kicked Andy Najar in the crotch just to really underscore that. So Messi was playing as sort of the 9 in this game, and you had Allende and Silvetti kind of flanking him. Rodriguez playing a little bit wider on that left side. And Messi was up for it. Miami were up for it. And when they're up for it, they're a hard team to beat. They're made easier it's easier for them to run over you if you're Nashville when you just give them goals and give them chances, which also happened in this game. If you're Nashville, you can't let Miami beat you. You have to make them beat you. And the second goal is one that comes to mind for me most in this game. It's a long ball over the top, and Walker Zimmerman, reliable old Walker Zimmerman, just flubs it. And Miami are in behind, and Messi scores. And all of a sudden, it's 2-0. And the game's basically over at that point. Nashville made life way too easy for Miami, but Miami, to their credit, and Taylor, to the question that you asked originally, yeah, they cared, they pressed, they actually defended. I think they did a lot of smart stuff in this game, and they got the win as a result.
But it was rough from Nashville, I think, overall. And that can be that second goal you mentioned. The first goal, it's the kind of deflected back pass, but then it's Meyer completely taking the wrong pursuit angle and I think overcommitting to trying to shut Messi's left side down so that when Messi then feints back to his right, everyone is discombobulated and then Messi just keeps on dribbling and scores the goal we've seen him score 1,000 times. Great goal, but it felt to me like Nashville was sort of overawed by that moment when you have Messi driving at you. I guess who wouldn't be overawed? But I think there is also an argument that it felt to me like they got their tactics wrong in this one. You had Nashville occasionally or frequently trying to kind of press high or send numbers forward, which meant you usually had 5 or 6 committed into Miami's sort of half. But what that usually meant was that when Miami would spread, this is how I saw it at least, when they would spread numbers out a little bit in possession, Nashville would go with them, and suddenly there'd be these huge gaps that you could play through, oftentimes into the feet of Lionel Messi or into space for Messi to kind of run onto or receive back to goal, or you could go direct as they did for the second goal. It felt like kind of anything Nashville tried to throw at Miami, none of it really seemed to work, and a lot of that has to do with Miami just having very good players, even if one of them was not Luis Suarez, who the camera cut to between 1 and 40 times, I think, in the first 15 minutes or so. A very decorative mate at that. That straw on that gourd had some gold in it, had some silver in it. It was a good look. It was a good look for him, who seemed overall pretty pleased to get a rest and enjoy his team just thumping the opposition.
Yeah, why not? Jeff, I'm curious what you thought of this game. Was this more Miami being great, Nashville more putting together a stinker? Where did you fall?
It's the 4th straight time these teams have played, and Nashville has already kind of resigned itself that it wasn't better than Miami this year with the way that they set up, with some of the decisions that Callahan was making. I mean, you even look at how disparaged they were at the fact that 3 of the 4 goals from Miami came from outside the box, right? So their idea was probably, okay, as long as we keep things close in the box, then we're going to slow them down on their dribble and we're going to be able to set it up. And then element of surprise, they weren't prepared. And part of that is also just the midfield throughout, especially this postseason, has not been whirring at a level that usually you would expect from a team that's going to be able to knock off Inter Miami, right? You need to be able to go toe-to-toe with them in the center of the park, and that's where you're able to retain your possession that will then frustrate them, but it's also where you're able to like quickly advance and break past their tired, weary legs and their poorly organized defensive strongholds. And Nashville just wasn't equipped to do that, right? And I think part of that's going to come into this offseason is looking and saying, is Jacob Schaffelberg effective enough to be our like first attacker off the bench, or is he someone who would be better to bring in tandem? Do we need someone who's a little bit more of an Ilsinho, or someone who's more of a facilitator who can come in and that's probably a piece that they would like to invest in, someone to take some pressure off Mukhtar in the second half. They have some questions about Walker Zimmerman, right?
Yep.
And his future coming up to the end of the contract. And at that point, if you're asking questions about Walker Zimmerman, every player is probably worth looking at. Now, I don't think that they should blow this up and go full rebuild. I think that would be really foolish. I think that they grew a lot in BJ Callahan's first season, but the question now just becomes, how do you get past Miami? Because ever since Lionel Messi stepped into Major League Soccer, that balance of those 2020 expansion teams has radically flipped on its head, where Nashville used to be the model organization, and Miami was floundering and making these mistakes and getting penalties and fines and all these things. And now Miami is still making mistakes and penalties and getting fines and these things, but now they're way better at soccer. Yep. And so how do you get better at soccer at that part of it? I think it's a project and sort of a slight retooling that Mike Jacobs and the rest of the staff will probably relish having the opportunity to do. But they just, I think this was one of those where you go into the game and it felt like the most inevitable, weirdly, of the 4, even though it wasn't the most lopsided per se on paper.
Jeff, you raised some good points with Nashville in terms of things that they should be thinking about over the offseason. I think Walker Zimmerman is the biggest question that they have. So he is one of a very, very short list of designated players whose contracts expire at the end of 2025 without option years for 2026, at least publicly announced option years. Zimmerman may be back in Nashville. Will it be as a DP? I'd be surprised. Will it be as something less than a DP? If so, that then gives Mike Jacobs in this front office the ability to either add another DP or probably more likely to go with that 2DP for U22 initiative roster model, and they can go add another young player. They can have a little bit more allocation money to spread across the roster to bring in some of the pieces that I think they still need, and we'll almost certainly see by looking back at this series that they still need to compete with the best of the best in Major League Soccer. I was disappointed with how poor Nashville were in the face of that Miami pressure. I think they need a little bit more ball-playing ability out of the back, or they just need more time in the system. Maybe it's a little bit of both. And they certainly need, I love that you brought up Schaffelberg, Jeff, who's a fine MLS player. They just need a little bit more in the attack. At least I think they need a little bit more in the attack. So there still are pieces missing for Nashville, and where Zimmerman falls in that equation, if he's even back next year on a new deal at all, because let's not forget he could just go somewhere else. I don't know what that's going to look like, but Zimmerman, I think, will be a piece to watch. It's going to tell us a lot about what Nashville want to do moving forward.
If I'm Nashville, I go to Zimmerman and say, you know that last game against Miami in which you were like absolutely at fault for the second goal and you had to body Messi and pick up a yellow card and you got knocked around a whole bunch? You don't want that to be your last game for us, do you? Nice. Come on. Sign for a veteran minimum. Come on. Be cool. I have a question for both of you about what Miami were doing because the pregame graphic lists them in a back 5. Taylor Schwalman very confidently saying absolutely not in a back 5, definitely in back 4. Definitely saw them in a back 5 defending quite a little bit.
Oh yeah,
is what I saw there,
especially after halftime.
It felt like Jordi Alba becoming a left center back seemed to be the recurring thing, but then also becoming a central midfielder. A central midfield of Jordi Alba, Sergio Busquets, and Rodrigo de Paul doesn't feel fair to me, but does feel very fun.
Don't worry, Taylor, they can't run, so it's it all balances out.
It's collectively you like tape them all together and they've got like 2 functional legs. All right,
yes.
I get it.
And they're both DePauls, yeah.
So is that about what we saw? That it was a sort of back 5 defensively and then a little bit more fluid in the attack?
Yeah.
And it asks a little bit more of Noah Allen on the left side to just remember to shift over to the left, but he was having to do that anyway all the way back in May if you looked at the touch maps of where Jordi Alba was going. Like it's in a weird way, it's like this. They know that this is the end of Jordi Alba and Sergio Busquets. I mean, they're nominally retiring. I will not be surprised if they just randomly show up and come out of retirement in early 2026, and this was a way to wipe the contracts off the books. That's just how Miami does business these days. But in the meantime, this is their swan song playing with Lionel Messi. And so I think it's a matter of how do we get the best play out of each of you. And I think that does mean not really having Jordi Alba defend in the way that you think of a left back defending. It's tucking in more, conserving his legs. It's these kind of things that Pep Guardiola was doing late in Kyle Walker's tenure with them, which is before John Stones became that guy. And it's the idea that if your fullback doesn't have the legs to track back defensively, the next best thing is to help fortify that mid bank of your defense. And I think that to that end, it's a little more effective because then he can also help pass out of sequences and provide left-sided support. It's interesting. I mean, like it's a good way. It's probably really overdue, but and I'm not confident that they have the defenders to really cover for him when you look at Frey and Falcone in the back. But they're trying it, and it looks like it's going to be what they're rolling out in the next round. So that's exciting.
Final question on this game for you both. We're going to play America's favorite game. Contrarian argument or legitimate argument?
Ooh.
I'm going to give you a statement. You tell me if this is legitimate or if I'm just being contrarian. Miami plays better with Suarez on the bench.
I think that might be a legitimate argument. I think it's
legit.
possible.
You go first.
I think one thing that seems clear to me in this game is that Miami pressed with a bit more energy, and not having one of your 38-year-olds on the field helps with that. And if you only get to have one of your 38-year-olds on the field, you want it to be Messi. Duh. So I think there's a real take in there. I don't think it's going to matter. I think Luis Suarez will start against FC Cincinnati. But and also to be clear, I don't think it's wildly better one versus the other. I also thought Nashville probably would have turned the ball over with Luis Suarez pressing them too. Like, they just weren't good in this game, and it's a small sample size, even though we have seen Suarez miss other games for other misconduct-related items this year. I still think Suarez and when Suarez is on the field, Miami are every bit good enough to win MLS Cup, and I don't think they were so blindingly good in this game that you have to have a real conversation with good old Luis about maybe having some more time to drink mate.
Fair enough. All right, let's take a break. Those are 2 games down. Many more still to be discussed. Back soon to do just that. Welcome back to the Total Soccer Show. So we have San Diego advancing. We have Miami advancing. Jeff, did you have both of them advancing in your bracket?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes. Nailed it.
And does that mean you are both perfect in your TSS Plus bracketology brackets?
Way to rub it in, Jeff. I mean, Taylor, way to rub it in. Jeff and I aren't perfect. Jeff, tell him why.
No,
I didn't make the
we're
mistake
not.
this time. Joe, damn it. I did it there.
No, you did it. There it is. There's the mistake. We're all allowed a few. No, 71 players from the Discord are doing a MLS bracket league right now, and I've got 2 picks that are wrong. Joe has 1 pick that's wrong. Only 2 people of the 71 have perfect brackets.
Well done.
So I've got some acronyms coming on. I hope I'm not implying any terms that we shouldn't say on this. Sorry, sponsors. Gavin V825, I'm very confident that one is still perfect, has a final of Philadelphia over Vancouver. I think that's one that pretty much checks out with the form guide over the entire season. And when you get to MLS Cup BCU FDL, they've got Miami over Minnesota in the final. And I think that they were probably a little more nervous, I'll say, than Gavin was, just as we're getting into that shootout that we'll talk at the end of this segment. But yes, we do have 2 perfect brackets in contention, which just goes to show how the MLS playoffs do be in terms of unpredictability.
That's how it do be. Jeff, what did you have in Cincinnati Columbus? Who did you expect to get out of that one?
That was actually like the biggest coin flip I had in the entire bracket. And I'd gone back and forth, and I think that I had just had too many concerns about Cincinnati being able to consistently tie together these sorts of performances against opponents who are as well drilled as Pat Noonan has them. But ultimately, it came down to the great other playoff decider, which is who has the better top end talent on your roster. And I think that it's far and away FC Cincinnati this year who is in better shape when you look at just the headliners on their squad than the Columbus Crew. And the redemption arc of Brenner being able to come back mid-season unexpectedly, totally catching us unaware, as being even available for this opportunity, coming back, reintegrating into playing a little bit more of a thankless role than he did, coming back from I think that there were some people who were happy to see him go just with how determined he was to get to Europe, but being able to come in and then score the decisive goal in here, I think just completely wipes that slate clean for goodwill, and moments like that can go a long way in a playoff bracket. It's just kind of a shame that they have to wait 2 weeks to try to pick it up for the next round, but really, really good moment, and just like a really good game that I think will be forgotten because it happened immediately after an instant classic of a game. But that was one I remember staying in the press box after the press conference just so I could watch it, and being able to see that game winner was truly electric and a really special moment at TQL.
Yeah, I mean, TQL Stadium like rocking, great atmosphere. The pregame festivities were pretty wild, pretty lively, pretty rowdy. Set the stage really well. And then for Cincinnati to respond the way they did, like basically 2 minutes after the Crew take the lead, Cincinnati equalize. Then that goal from Brenner, which is like a really good team goal that's also really scrappy and kind of fortunate, but then also individual all at once rolled together. I thought this game was very fun and kind of fascinating on an individual level as well, Joe.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, there were a couple of matchups that really intrigued me in this game. The first was sort of a repeat of Game 2, which was how would Columbus build through Cincinnati, where in Game 2, back at Lower.com Field, Columbus consistently found Taha Bruin and occasionally Diego Rossi between the lines as the free man, sort of in a very similar setup to how San Diego found Anders Dreyer between the lines, except Cincinnati have something competent on the back line to actually go and deal with some of those players. And they had the same pattern in this game where Columbus could find Rossi and Habrun before Habrun came off in the first half, which is a bit odd in this game. You had Columbus breaking lines.
Was that tactics? Was that yellow card? Was that injury?
I think it was tactics. I mean,
Okay.
only injury and tactics made sense to me, and I didn't see anything about an injury. So I could be mistaken on that front, but either way, an early change for Columbus. And I think that maybe had slightly Wilfred Nancy's eye looking towards being a bit more direct in the second half, and we did see a goal from Columbus off of direct play. But really, Columbus didn't create a ton of chances. The build-up play was good. They were finding ways to progress into the attacking half. But they had a Cucho or Wissam Abou Ali or a whatever they thought Daniel Gazdag was supposed to be whole in the front line. And that's the difference between this year's Crew and last year's Crew. Yes, this year's Crew also was a bit worse defensively. But if you put Cucho back in this team, they're probably winning this series. I mean, they were the better team in Game 2, and Games 1 and 3 were very, very tight, and they just came up on the wrong side of those results. This Columbus team just had too much talent bleed, either due to exits of the club or due to injuries or due to poor acquisitions, to actually be able to go out there and really stake their claim in the series. The other matchup that I think is interesting for USMNT fans is that Ender Echenike, the wingback for Cincinnati, dusted Max Arfston over and over and over again.
Like legit targeted. That felt like they were just like, get the ball at Echenike, he's going to beat him every time.
100% agree, Taylor. That was like blindingly obvious to me in this game as well. And it's just something to note for USMNT fans. Max Arfston has a lot of good things in his game. He's also got some problems, Taylor.
Okay, let's break that down for a moment, because I am very confused by Max Arfsted in this game. He does, I think, get better as the game goes on. There are more sort of individual defensive moments that I thought were fine to good. He has a couple where he bodies Echenike. At one point, he wins the ball very aggressively, very hard. It leads to a good Russell Rowe shot that ends up being a tame effort, but it's a good opportunity. If we're kind of breaking Arfsted in half, which you shouldn't do, but if you do,
ouch,
defensively,
I call the top half.
Fair enough.
Okay.
More productive.
The most important part. Defensively, on a scale of 1 to 10.
You don't know that.
How are we rating Max Arfsted, the defender?
Oh, man.
3? I don't know.
Yeah, that's about
but
right.
not even just last night.
No.
Generally
Yeah.
speaking.
Okay.
Okay.
We're on the same
this
page.
was 3. This was something that we talked about a lot coming out of the Gold Cup. And something that I wrote about a few times too, where it's just like that shift that Pochettino makes to a 3-4-2-1 really is needed to get Max Arfsted to coherently fit into a left-sided defensive role, because throughout the Gold Cup he was also getting targeted. I remember I was at that game against Costa Rica in the quarterfinal, and the right winger wasn't necessarily the best attacker on Costa Rica. It wasn't their plan to go through him. However, he was finding so much open space right outside the box and had so much ability just to kind of do that little kind of teasing dribble into the corner of the box to see if the defender will bite and then back up. And there was a time where Arfsted actually bit on that, which is just defending 101 around the areas. You can't make those kind of midfield tackles once a player gets into the box. It's not his game. And for down, I would say down the stretch, and even especially in that successful game of the series, their win in Columbus over Cincinnati, Arfsted was in his bag doing his usual sort of attacking minded complete wingback sort of role, where he is truly playing forward and sending in those crosses and trying to dribble his way towards the box himself, and not really worrying and abdicating sort of defensive responsibility in some phases of play. But if you have a player doing that, this happened in the first game between Philly and Chicago with Andrew Gutman. If you overcommit a fullback too much, you're just begging for an opponent to come in, and it's going to shift your entire defensive line over. So it just looks like they didn't really have the rotations right this time around for Columbus to be able to cover for those opportunities that Cincinnati was getting down that flank. And confounding player, but a player who does have such clear strengths that I think some coaches just want to continue to try to work through the weaknesses a bit.
So to provide the end cap then, so 3 out of 10 defensively, attacking wise, though, as that left wing back, what are we going at a 10?
7? I don't know. Let's add him up to a perfect 10, right? And then split him right down the middle. He's a pretty average international player, maybe a little bit below average. I mean, it's the duality of Max Arfson. It's the same as it ever was, but it was certainly on display in this game. And it hurt Columbus. Not so much that they were wildly the worst team in this game. Like, I think this game was a coin flip. Just like really game 1 was a coin flip. Cincinnati had Brenner come up in a big moment, and none of Columbus's players did that. Like, Cincinnati are just more talented at this stage. And the Crew, looking forward, they're about to get a little less talented because Darlington Nagbe's sailing off into the sunset. Really curious about what that means for Columbus. How did they replace his minutes next year? How did they replace some of what he brings in terms of press resistance in Wilfried Nancy's system? And by the way, is Wilfried Nancy going to be here next year? There's all sorts of questions around Columbus. I think their offseason is going to be fascinating.
I have it on good authority that it's going to be Zimmerman and Nagbe and Nancy at Celtic next season.
That checks out. I mean, Nagbe to Celtic was a thing back in the day, wasn't it? Like, that was a legitimate link. That was a little before my time, but I like it.
Any other praise, individual or otherwise, for FC Cincinnati, who do end up getting this result? We talked a little bit about Brenner, but maybe we should spend at least a minute praising the victors from this one.
Yeah, I mean, like, look, I think that the story of Cincinnati throughout the season has been that they can keep the floor from falling out almost every single time. It's just a matter of how often they reach for the ceiling. And I think that now you're just seeing so much more cohesion with that front three of Evander, Brenner, and Denke, which helps a lot. Denke didn't do a lot in this game, right? Didn't need to do a lot, didn't take a single shot, but that wasn't what the game was offering. You could probably look and say that was the defensive focus, was to cut down on passing lanes to Kevin Denke in the box. And usually that's a really good idea, especially when a team plays with one striker. And that's where Brenner finds his opportunities. That's where Evander is still able to pop off 4 shots. This is solving a lot of the issues that made them fall at this step last year against New York City FC. Keep in mind, they lost on that shootout that kind of helped build the cult hero status around Matt Freese to an even greater extent, came in last year's playoffs. And the big thing was just that they did not have the front end talent to be able to win those very close games. And we're talking about it here. This was a kind of a coin flip of the game, but they kind of weighed the coin a little in their favor by being able to bring in Denke and Evander and Brenner for a lot of money, to be fair. That is not a cheap trio to bring in necessarily, especially the Evander and Denke of it all, but this is why it's worth it. These are the sorts of games that they're now better equipped to win, and I think that sets them up much better against Miami than it would have a year ago.
All right. It's time for Minnesota-Seattle. Joe, I'm going to come to you first to get you like a good 30 seconds of audio before we get 10 minutes of Jeff for the rest of this one. Joe, good game?
My favorite thing on this show is Taylor thinking that Jeff's a Minnesota United fan when Jeff is very much not a Minnesota United fan. It's a great recurring bit that I'd like to keep going until the end of time. This game was awesome. I think I said it already. I mean, we've already done a lot on this game, to be fair. This is an all-time classic, where let me just run through the flow of events, and then maybe we can hear from Jeff how he experienced them. Seattle take the lead 2-0 on the first 2 shots of the game. Up 2 goals very early on. Then Minnesota get one back via a lovely goal from Joaquin Pereira. Great free kick. It's 2-1. Then the next main event is a Joseph Rosales red card before halftime. Absolutely idiotic red card on Jesus Ferreira. Goes up and like headbutts him a little bit. Can't do that. No matter how softly you do it, you can't do that. So Minnesota United at halftime are down a goal and they're down a man. Then they get 2 more goals in the second half off of set pieces. So now they're up 3-2. It's the most Minnesota United way of going up 3-2 possible. It looks like they're going to see the game out. They don't. Jordan Morris scores a goal that make it 3-3, forcing the game to penalties, but not before. Brian Smetzer subs on Andrew Thomas, the penalty shootout specialist. Thomas enters the game. Thomas has to make a play on the first shootout, or the first shot of the shootout. It's a Joaquin Pereira shot. Thomas dives to his left, hurts his hand. I think dislocated something in his hand, hurt his hand in some way. He then has to get it taped up, so we're waiting for the shootout to start again. He then proceeds to save 2 penalties in the shootout, Andrew Thomas.
Can I just interject to say it felt like, got Alex Rodon in goal. And man, that would have been fun. He gets called over. There's a quick chat.
I didn't even think about that.
I feel like they cut to him on the sidelines and his face seemed to say like, really? I prefer not. And then it cut back to the goalkeeper being taped up and Andrew Thomas ends up being mostly okay.
I believe Alex Rodon has made a save in an MLS game before, or at least like a claim or something like that in goal. So maybe that would have gone great. Maybe it would have gone better for Seattle because it's Andrew Thomas, who is I believe the 10th taker for Seattle. He has a chance to keep the shootout alive. He steps up, takes it after St. Clair's already taken and made his, and he thuds the ball off the crossbar and Seattle lose. There's just so many moments in this game. This was a game of moments. Seattle fumbled their season away. It's got to sting if you're a Sounders fan. Minnesota, I have no clue how you pulled this off other than you're really good at your one thing, and you should count your lucky stars because it is a miracle that you advanced.
All right, Jeff, let's talk about your favorite all-time team and how excited you are to discuss them. You're in the stadium for this game. Jeff looked completely frozen as I introduced that. He's giving me no joy from this. But like, what is the vibe when it's 2-0 that early? How down is the stadium, and how do they get back into it? Like, when you are down that badly, that quickly in a playoff game, is there an individual moment? Is there a player who kind of picks up the crowd? Is it the crowd itself that recognizes the atmosphere has to change? What does it?
It was nothing for a while, because I think for a lot of people it brought back a lot of the memories of the Western Conference Final in 2020 when Minnesota was up 2-0 in Seattle in like the 75th minute and then blew it by the end of regulation and conceded 3 goals. And it just felt like there was this inevitability when Minnesota came against the Seattle Sounders in big games. Was generally the vibe. And so the first goal, it was already kind of quiet. The second goal, the nature of it, where it's just like, you know, short throw goes in, and then the ball just like scoobs under the foot of a defender, and it looks like they're trying to trap the ball, which is bizarre, right? And it's just it's such a fluky sort of second goal to concede that it's just like the bounces aren't gonna be there today, right? And this just isn't that sort of day. And it was silent, like around Allianz Field. There was like, you know, credit to the Wonderwall for trying to keep chants going, but like, usually the atmosphere of Allianz Field in any stadium will build because of the other 3 sides of a stadium and not the supporters bank, right? Just because it does take that sort of multiple angles of whatever, sound, physics, blah, blah, blah.
Nailed it.
What ended up actually fixing it was the Joaquin Pereira free kick. And this is that sort of thing where when he signed last summer, everyone assumed he was the Emmanuel Reynoso replacement, and that just wasn't really his game. He plays more withdrawn. He wants to get on the ball sooner. He does more defensive things. He isn't as decisive of a shooter or even necessarily a chance creator. He picked up on that sort of midway through this season. But that free kick, being able to have that precision to just take that opportunity, for so much of this year, Minnesota's been relying on luck, right? And they admit it. They absolutely do, because a big part of it is their set-piece philosophy isn't, you know, we're throwing it to the forehead of our shooter. We're kicking it to our main target. It is knock-ons. It is the second ball that the defense can't prepare for. It's getting a flick-on header, completely looping over it, right? And that requires luck. It does require some skill, but you do need to have that sort of Dennis Rodman-like ability to predict luck, right? And I think that when you can take that control yourself and just make a really good direct free kick, it kind of tells the crowd, like, you've got a little bit more in this. And from that moment on, it was just louder and louder. And I remember back in 2017 when they were doing the designs of Allianz Field, one thing that Populous was really proud of, the architects who had also built Sporting Park before that, was that the crowd went up. And it was supposed to keep the sound in the stadium better, and every sightline was going to be better. You're kind of building on top of it. Very kind of old school English was the thing. That was a stadium design choice that was made for a game like Saturday. The idea that you can keep the atmosphere in the stadium even better, so that once you get to a shootout and everyone in unison is shouting DSC, it just is the only thing that an opponent can think, because that's how on top of them the sound is. And it was just one of those moments where it's like, you like to see those design choices pay off, but you really like to see that they thought about that and that they were trying to create an atmosphere that can foster such a big moment. So it took a bit, right? And I think that there were some really obvious issues for Minnesota. It was so clear how much rotation they needed to do all year. Like Jefferson Diaz and Bonky Longwane, the gap that they left open from right side center back to right wing back on the opening goal, it was just too easy for Seattle to kind of barnstorm right down the half spaces. And same thing on the right side, the next sequence between Nicolas Romero, or not Romero wasn't starting, Boris Dugan and Joseph Rosales, who I think is also not a natural partnership on the left. They had their issues. They were exploited. They deserved to be exploited, but they created their own luck. And that has ultimately been the story of Minnesota's season so far. I agree with Joe. They should feel very fortunate. There's going to be a game where they just don't get the luck, and that's where it ends, but they got back to where they were last year. And I think that after all the duress that they went through over the summer, that was the second, that was kind of the main goal, and now everything from here is their original goals that they can try to pursue, which is getting to MLS Cup.
Jeff, if you would set the stage for me, like how quiet, what is Dane Sinclair's vibe post game in normal interviews when you're just kind of chatting with him?
Yeah, I mean, great. He's very level-headed. You know, like he generally does give you something to work with. He's not going to be a goalkeeper who's going into the Bull Durham school of, you know, we played for the next game and everyone in the back line did their part. He will take credit for his successes.
Did good.
Right.
Everybody got to work good. Yeah.
when I asked him, like, what did you see when those half-space chances were coming down in the first 10 minutes that I was talking about in the last answer, and I asked him about that, his whole thing was, well, I thought that one of them was offside, and I was talking to the ref and saying, oh, hey, you got to put up and did this whole, 2-minute thing about, the offside rule, the VAR and stuff, and I was like, that's beside the point, so whatever. But it's not what you see in shootouts. And keep in mind, this is a guy who did a shootout in the Copa America bronze medal game against Uruguay, so he has gone up against Bielsa, and he's gone up against... in these sorts of big moments, and I think he learned a lot of that sort of dark arts mind game sort of thing, or refined it. He always liked it, but that gave him a chance to really embrace it in its natural habitat of international knockout soccer, and he's taken it back in a very direct way, to such a point he was getting booed on every touch in Seattle in the second game just because of his behavior in the shootout in the first game, from what I understand. And that was a lot of the ball isn't on the spot. It isn't on the front of the spot, right? That's apparently the most important part of a shootout, is whether or not the ball is lightly touching the blade of grass that the groundskeeper put a little white paint on. I love it. It's so funny.
I loved it from a gamesmanship standpoint. Because there were moments when, from his angle, it did look like the ball was sitting well out in front of the spot. But, even if it's just a little adjustment, you still make the taker have to adjust it and reevaluate and look at different spots and decide if that's exactly what you want it. And so many moments in this shootout, I thought for sure this player has taken way too long trying to find the exact spot that they want the ball. And then almost every single time, they buried the penalty. So it shows what I know, but it does show that Dane St. Clair likes some gamesmanship, likes some head games. I especially enjoyed when he dropped the character for a moment. He went from Gordon Ramsay, 11 out of 10, to when Andrew Thomas has that injury, you see him walk over and kind of check on him for a second. And then as soon as Andrew Thomas is like, I'm fine, goes right back up. And he's back into the, I'm annoyed by everything, I'm mad about everything. But also took a very good penalty and didn't go with the smash it as hard as I can route that Andrew Thomas did, and Andrew Thomas maybe ruining that decision in the end. This shootout was insane, including that, I believe I'm correct in saying that outside of Albert Rusnak, every single Seattle player went to the left. Even Andrew Thomas, who smacks it off the bar, it's center left, but they went left every single time. They knew where they wanted to put the ball, and there's some really well-taken strikes in there as a result. There are also some not as well-taken strikes. When is the moment for you, Jeff, in the stadium that it felt like this is going to happen for Minnesota? Is it just basically when St. Clair takes his? Because that was the moment for me. It just seemed like, I don't know if Thomas is going to extend this one that much further.
I think it was. I think it took St. Clair making his, because you went through the queue and a lot of Minnesota's usual takers weren't there. They had brought in Julian Gressel late in the first game, and then he had hit his off the post, and so he wasn't included. So in theory, one of their 5 preferred kickers wasn't even on the field, to say nothing of Yeboah coming off because he couldn't play in 90 minutes and they needed to start him in this game. But every single time you would look at who are the next two, so to speak, because you didn't know who Seattle was sending, but you would look at who Minnesota had walking up, and you would look at the queue of who was left in Seattle and be like, I think Seattle has more veteran kickers out there. I think that they have more players who are more logical picks here. So it did really take until St. Clair. And part of it is also just again, that atmosphere was so electric, where it was every time a Minnesota kicker came up, it was hush tones, right? And every time it was a Seattle kicker, it was the most raucous thing. It was Minnesota was setting up for a quarter kick, right? And it was just, that's good. That's great. But it's also going to mean that you don't think this is a predictable result anymore. It was always going to come down to vibes. And especially once you had Thomas come in and someone who was willing to go toe-to-toe and play the same sort of game as St. Clair in that shootout, it was excellent. It was a fantastic sort of validation of playoff soccer as a concept, right? And the idea that you want to have these teams come against each other, even if you do have your sort of questions about whether or not it's a valid way to determine a champion. It's this is peak entertainment, and it's just for something like soccer, I don't know why you wouldn't want that.
I loved it. I thought for sure it was going to finish after 5 rounds. I left myself enough space in my diagram so that I got them all in. But man, it was a wild shootout. It was a wild time. Thomas gets 6 of 10 correctly. St. Clair 4 of 10. He just he was doing a lot of feinting one way and then going the other and hoping that it would work out. And I guess in the end it did, though I don't know how much credit he can take for the miss in the end. But still, he gets a lot of credit for helping Minnesota advance. Credit to them. Credit to us for getting through 4 games so far, 1 remaining, and some news and notes from around the league. We'll get to that very shortly. Welcome back to the Total Soccer Show, everybody. Let's go to NYC FC's victory over Charlotte. Joe, a game in which we saw NYCFC score the same goal 2, 3 times, 4 times, 8 times? I'm not really clear.
I mean, 100 at least, I think, in this game. I mean, it's Charlotte FC with 3 different attacking set pieces, NYCFC scoring off of each of those moments. Like, they scored the same goal 3 times, effectively. It was 3, not 100, it was 3. And that killed Charlotte in this game. It's so weird, Taylor, and soccer's such a funny game, because I actually thought Charlotte played a fine game. I think this is probably their best game, for the most part, outside of those moments, of the series so far. It just so happened that their worst moments were really bad, or the NYCFC were really on their game. Nico Fernandez had some really great individual moments that made it seem like he's starting to bed in to life in New York City a little bit better. But man, Charlotte, I thought created chances. Zaha showed up in this game. I thought he had some really good moments. It just didn't matter because Charlotte couldn't stop NYCFC when it really did matter. I would love to be jubilant about NYCFC in this moment. And I'm struggling because, number one, I don't think they were really impressive in this series as a whole. I don't think either one of these teams was on balance. And number two, they lost 2 key players in this game, and that's got to sting if you're Pascal Janssen. It's got to sting if you're a NYCFC player or fan. Andres Perea goes down with a nasty leg injury, broken leg. He's had surgery on it. He's going to be out for some time. I really feel for him and our best wishes. And then Aiden O'Neill, supposed to be this kind of heady veteran defensive midfield presence for this team, he picks up a stupid, let's just call it a stupid yellow card in this game that gets him suspended for the next round.
Why is it stupid?
It's an afters play, and Wilfred Zaha's on the ground, and Aiden O'Neill has the ball at his feet, and he just kicks it towards Zaha. Like, he doesn't kick it hard, he doesn't kick it with an intent to injure him, he kicks it towards Zaha and hits Zaha. You can't do that. Like, you can't kick the ball at a player when they're on the ground. You can't do it. It's the easiest yellow card you could possibly give, and that ends up, based off of yellow card accumulation, suspending him for their game against Philly. We don't need to preview that game right now, but NYCFC lost 2 starters in this series, and they're already missing Keaton Parks. They didn't play especially great ball, but they had great moments in this game, and that is something that they can potentially bottle and bring out again. I just wish that I could feel better about NYCFC in this game after this game, and I'm just kind of struggling, even while saying congratulations, and I think this is a deserved victory in the series overall. Just a lot of weird stuff, a lot of weird different angles for New York City right now.
Joe, if we're characterizing this win, scrappy? Can we say it's a scrappy win for NYCFC, given the way they created some of their goals?
Yeah, if Scrappy Doo was a soccer performance, I think this sort of felt like that.
Oh, man. But I'm with you, though, because there's the Bronico chance when it's still 0-0, that it feels like, put that on frame, certainly put that in the back of the net. Very different story. This game goes a very different way. I thought for all the world he was going to score that one, and it was going to be Charlotte's night. It was not meant to be. Instead, it is some chaotic moments and some chaotic takes from New York. Joe, the opening goal, though, we have to spend a moment on this one.
Yeah, it's a great goal.
It's a great goal. It's a lovely goal. It's a very long run from Martinez, and it's some good wins along the way. Is this your thesis statement in why you have concerns about Tim Ream as the starting center back for the U.S. men's national team?
I mean, yeah, he gets dusted on this goal. And to be fair to him, like, plenty of Charlotte players got dusted in transition in this game. He got traffic coned, Tim Ream, on this goal. And it's, I mean, I could point to a half dozen other examples for club or country, right, in the last 18 months. So this isn't new information. This is, like the Max Arfson thing, just a very clear limitation on Tim Ream's game. And it hurts for Charlotte that they are so reliant on him at this stage, like 38 years old. You get a lot of benefit, but you got to surround Tim Ream with other guys who are mobile and who are able to come up in moments. And Charlotte are just an old team, man. It's not just Ream. Ream's the oldest of the bunch, but they got a bunch of old dudes, 30-plussers in their back 6. If you count Bronico, I think they have maybe 6 of those guys. And they're starting 11. It's not great. And Ream, of course, needs to bear full responsibility in that moment because even if you have the most mobile guy next to you, you still got traffic coned.
He did. If he takes out Martinez there, like, you can get a red card in your own half, right? Not that he would have, but if you take him out there, like, otherwise he's in on goal, clearly. And it is Ream who ends up getting back to then allow, like, the cover defender to slide over, but by that point it's essentially too late. Still a great finish, but you can get a red there.
I mean, I don't know all the specific ins and outs of every rule in soccer, but you, by the letter of the law, yes, that is a possible thing that would have happened, and it still would have been a better thing to do than just letting the attacker skate by you.
I suppose. All right, Jeff, let me ask you this. Which fan base should feel more enthusiastic about their coach returning for another season? Charlotte with Dean Smith or Portland with Phil Neville?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I was like thinking about this with Portland a lot, where it was like throughout the year, Neville was saying a lot of like, you know, we didn't do tactics when Manchester United was the best team in the world, right? And Christoph Welde signing and immediately being like, I love a shot from long ball. I'm pretty sure that this is just kind of like the resurgence of Barclays men coming in now, like who were as players, who are now kind of as coaches trying to usher in this more kind of entertaining, free-flowing, decision-making, get fans out of their seats stuff. I feel better about it with Charlotte because I think they have an underlying structure that can underpin all of this and keep them in games better than Portland, and I think that their records of goals conceded and also results will very much bear this out. But I think that when you look in this game, it was kind of a talent issue by the end of it when you look in the final third. I mean, like, even on that third goal that Fernandez Marcao scores, the defender who was most involved in desperately trying to get the ball off his feet was Wilfried Zaha. It wasn't anyone who was a defender or midfielder on Charlotte. And that's concerning. You know, that's where I look and I say, did they even have the personnel to be able to pull this off? And, you know, I think it's as simple as saying that Toklamati and Vargas, for all their quality, I really like them. I like their potential a lot. And I think especially Toklamati is going to have a really bright future ahead of him. And I think Vargas is a very capable starting playmaker, kind of secondary facilitator in MLS. Fernandez, Marcao, and Martinez were just a cut above and were more focused, more locked in, were able to execute with the fine chances they had. When you look at like shooting goals added and all these expected metrics, just how much worse Charlotte was performing. I think Charlotte still is going to have some questions about what's the ceiling on this, though, because I think that throughout the year, Joe mentioned it, especially during that 9-game winning streak, and I completely agree, especially in hindsight, just these weren't impressive results. These weren't the results that necessarily indicated this was a team that was building towards being a juggernaut. It was a team that was finding its own luck and kind of riding those highs week to week. And I think right now when you look at the Eastern Conference, there's so many better organized, disciplined opponents that you're going to run up against that it becomes really difficult to sort of ride those, right? So I don't know. I think that Charlotte probably will feel more confident in it. But yeah, I'm still just wondering how this scales ultimately, especially with how the squad's constructed right now.
Who goes further in the playoffs next season if both coaches return?
I don't know if Portland gets back to the playoffs as constructed. So
yep. Charlotte. I mean, the thing with Charlotte, and the thing that should be an encouragement to them is that Pep Biel transforms this team. And I think we're talking about them very differently if Pep Biel's on the field, because all of a sudden, I mean, Charlotte pretty much play like Cincinnati, and they've got their game-breaking number 10. They've got a good striker running off of him. They've got some other quality players. I think stylistically it's possible to win games in the postseason how Dean Smith wants to play. This roster just wasn't good enough without Pep Biel, and there aren't many rosters in MLS that can survive missing their best player. Now, there are some, very clearly. We talked about San Diego basically being able to miss whoever they want. I think that's possible, and I do not think Dean Smith is an elite-level coach in Major League Soccer. Same with Phil Neville, which is a separate conversation for another time. But I think Charlotte very much have potential to be a good team next year in a very competitive Eastern Conference. They just need Biel back. And without him in this series for 2 games, they created basically nothing. In the third game, when they did create, which was great for them, they couldn't stop counterattacks. So I think this roster still needs help, but more than anything, they need their best player back on the field, and they're going to get that next year.
All right. Congratulations to New York, or NYC FC, with the moving on to the next round. Commiserations to Charlotte for doing the opposite of that. Let's spend some time talking about a few moves that have happened outside of the playoffs. We've got Corey Ray in St. Louis. Either of you feeling optimistic or strong one way or the other about that one?
Yeah, I'll be really interested.
Go, Jeff.
Yeah, I'm just really interested to see how he'll do outside of Montreal. That's all I'll say. Joe, you go ahead.
Well, what does that mean? Do you explain that first?
Well, I think that a lot of people, when he was with Columbus, assumed that he was going to be kind of the next from that sort of pipeline of Bezpachenko disciples to be able to come in and step in and do well. And when he went to Montreal, it looked like he would have a really good project to be able to have to really lean into that, you know, decisions that for most clubs are squad guys 8 through 20, who for Montreal are guys like 2 through 7, having to make more of those decisions just off of the meager resources that the Saputos make available. The way that he left was always just kind of confusing. It was kind of a line item in a family press release that they were rebuilding, right? So it will be nice to see. I think St. Louis is a club that really wants stability. I think that they feel really frustrated by how they followed up such a dynamic entry, especially seeing San Diego now kind of eat their lunch in terms of the greatest expansion season of all time. Now they don't even really have that. So they have to truly reinvent themselves and kind of get their fan base back on track right now, because it really soured in a big way for them with the Melberg era, which was still this season, if you can believe it. So, yeah, optimistic overall, though. I think that Corey Ray's up for it.
I would agree. I agree with the top line takeaway. I think Ray's a good hire for St. Louis. 2 things, Jeff. I think you slipped there. You said something about a good project in Montreal. There's no such thing. There's no such thing as a good project in Montreal. That
Yeah,
was doomed from the
project.
start, and I wouldn't read anything into how short that tenure was of Corey Ray and CF Montreal, just because Montreal are an absolute disaster and they're a joke of an MLS club. For Ray in St. Louis, let me start with the bad, and then I'll get the good. I think there's some red flags around St. Louis right now, which let me just lay two things out for you. St. Louis made all of their end-of-year roster decisions before hiring a chief soccer officer, before hiring Corey Ray or someone else.
Perfect. Yeah.
What are you doing, man? Like, what? You didn't have to do that then. You could have waited until you hired somebody. That makes no sense to me. Why are you having someone, presumably higher up in the org chart? Diego Giuliani is the president of this club. Doesn't make any sense to me why he is allowing his club, or whether he is making them or he is allowing someone else to make them. That makes zero sense. That's thing one. Thing two, why are you giving Roman Berkey a DP deal before you hire a CSO? That's massive. I mean, I think Roman Berkey's a good player, and I don't even really have a huge beef with that decision, given the current construction of St. Louis's roster, though as a general rule, I'm against giving DP deals to goalkeepers. My word. Like, what is happening in St. Louis? So that's concerning. I think Corey Ray's, to the positive, I think he's a really sharp guy. I've never heard someone in MLS circles have a bad thing to say about Corey Ray. I think most people view him very highly, and Jeff's right. He came from that Tim Bezbachenko staff in Columbus, in Toronto before that, and there's a lot of really capable people that have come out from that. So it should be encouraging for St. Louis fans. I would be thrilled with this hire if I was a St. Louis fan. But man, there's some other weird stuff going on in St. Louis. So I hope that Corey Ray is allowed to do his job. That's, at the end of the day, that's what I really want for St. Louis, because I think he'll do it fairly well, but I don't know 100% if he's going to be allowed to do it in full.
All right. Any concerns about the state of things in New England, Joe?
I mean, yeah. They did make a hire recently, Marko Mitrovic, and I think it's a fine hire. We don't know what Marko Mitrovic, the professional manager, is like. So Mitrovic came from the US U20s. He was in charge of the U.S. Olympic team in France. That would have been summer of 24, right?
Yep.
So he's been in the youth national teams. He's been inside of U.S. soccer. Mikey Varas has come out of that, had a lot of success in San Diego. These are very different situations, Varas and Mitrovic, even though they both came from the same job. Varas was with the U20s and worked his way up from there. They came from U.S. soccer. San Diego has like an organizational ethos of how they want to operate. New England don't have that. So I'm a bit worried about Mitrovic and this hire, because he's kind of a black box, I guess, of sorts right now for the Revs, and the Revs roster, I think, needs some real love. You know, Tom's been talking about how, Tom Bogert has been reporting about how attractive that job seems to be, according to how candidates are viewing it, because they have Carles Gil. Carles Gil's past it, man. He's a good player. He's a good MLS player. Don't get me wrong. He's still a starting level MLS player, and I think he's probably a very good starting level MLS player. He's no longer MVP candidate, Carles Gil. He's no longer MVP winner, Carles Gil. He is a tier or two beneath that at this stage of his career. Outside of that, there's not a lot of top-end talent in that team, and you need a transformational manager, I think, to make New England into a team that can really compete in the East. Mitrovic may be that. I don't know. But that I don't know is a concern to me, given how this roster, I think, needs some TLC. The positive for Mitrovic is that the Revs Academy sneakily is one of the best in MLS, where they brought through Barak Tarvic, they brought through Noel Buck, they brought through Peyton Miller, who's the crown jewel at the moment of that club. He's going to make them a lot of money. I think Mitrovic, because of his experience with young players, makes a lot of sense for the future for New England, and that's great, and that's probably more important than immediately putting some Band-Aids on this thing and getting it running in the present to go and like make a wild card game. I don't know, but man, there's still a lot of stuff that has to come into focus for the Revs in this roster, and I'm a bit concerned about that.
Jeff, concerns for you?
Yeah, some. And I think I agree with Joe. A lot of them are just roster where they're at with the turnover from that core that set a points record under Bruce Arena. It is fully into another evolution, and it's just the final stages are the headliners like Carles Gil, and that's harder to overturn. My concern is, you know, I watched every minute of those Olympics, and I watched most of the U20 World Cup, and I think that one thing that really came through with Mitrovic is that he likes to build around his midfield. His midfielders generally perform the best in the tournament. When you think of Tanner Tessman in the Olympics, Gianluca Busio also had a really good tournament before he got injured in that final group game. But it was a matter of how it all funnels, and then also defensive structure, some easy bypasses that I think at the time it's very easy to categorize as international soccer, especially youth international soccer. You're not playing alongside each other terribly often going into these windows, and so there's a lot of unfamiliarity that's going to cause these sorts of lapses. The question pretty much, Joe gave the high end of probably why this happened. It's Mikey Varas, right? And you could also go all the way back in the U20 coach history to Siggy Schmidt. This is kind of where he, really came onto the scene. He was great at coaching already by then, but this was something that kind of helped him parlay into the Galaxy job, right, back in '99. And I think that you look at Tab Ramos, who had that position with the U20s for the entirety of the 2010s, 11 through 19, and then was hired by the Houston Dynamo, another organization that's kind of known for trying to cut corners with some of their spending, but also really wanting to build through youth. But I think New England's doing it far better than Houston, to give them credit, to be fair. But it's just a matter of now that translation from coaching youth internationals to senior professionals is a very considerable change in job description. And so the parts of that job description that change about the day-to-day in training, about being able to speak away veteran, that's going to motivate a veteran and not make them feel like they're being told that you're worse than your opponent and you're an underdog, which is a card that a lot of these kinds of coaches will try to lean into. It'll be very interesting to see. But it's an opportunity that was probably inevitable once he took that U20 job, that he would end up here eventually.
And so he does, and so do we. A full show reviewed, lots of games discussed, lots of moments analyzed. I've enjoyed it immensely, gentlemen. I think the plan is to come back next week for maybe a next round preview, or maybe we can wait till the week after. Who knows how the playoffs truly fully work to bring the snark back home. Jeff, I feel like if anybody understands it, it's you.
Understand snark? Sure.
I was going to say the playoff structure, generally speaking.
I mean, yeah, it's very coherent. It's very well curated, methodical, and it's fun, right? Like it's the thing that gets frustrating is just you want the games to happen. That's why it's so frustrating when it's so stop-start for all of this. Like,
especially when they were like really good and entertaining and fun, and you kind of want to keep those good vibes going. Let's play some games on a Saturday night. Jeff Ruder, thank you, as always, for taking the time to break it all down with us this week.
Come on, you loons.
And Joe Lowry, the same to you, but with your name in place of Jeff's. I got there.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think we can do a conference semifinal preview, and we're going to have some news to talk about next week also, so stay tuned for that.
Sounds good to me. Stay tuned indeed. We'll talk to you again very soon, but thank you, listeners, for continuing to support and enjoy the show.